Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward, and this is Face to Face. This week, we continue our conversation with longtime Manitoba Metis Federation President David Chartrand. Chartrand is also currently the national spokesperson for the Metis National Council, an organization facing its own upheaval. This April, MNC is set to elect its first new president in nearly 2 decades. But whether the annual General Assembly moves ahead and who participates is still up in the air. President Chartrand, thanks again for joining us. And let's start with what you believe is at the heart of this current infighting with the Metis National Council.
Well, I don't call it infighting. I actually call it where we as governments are having a clear dispute on a matter of principle on who is the Metis Nation. I think this needs to reflect its history from where it is today, and it stems back a couple hundred years, right, to 1816 on, where the nation is really formulated, of course, in Western Canada, where the nation is raised their flag to battle, and it's called, of course, the Massacre of Seven Oaks. The government described it as that, but it's really the Victory of Frog Plain is what we call it. And we look forward to free trade, a dispute of who we were, a culture, identity, laws being established by our people. And we look at it in the Sayre trial in the 1840s, and then we move forward to Riel coming back in 1870 after some schooling to defend who we are as a people in our homes and our families and our identity and our languages. And then you see the final battles in Batoche in 1885. So you see a continuum of a people that existed. And it was known by Eastern Canada about these so-called half-breeds. And at one time we were called the flower-beaded people because all of our beadwork and people knew, especially First Nations, others also knew, as soon as you've seen the beading of the Métis, there's always to be prairie flowers. And there's a story, of course, combined in the beadwork that's there. So at one time in the early 1800s, we were called the flower-beaded people. And then we were called half-breeds, mixed bloods. There's different country-born. First Nation used to call us Katependimisuat. That means the people that hone themselves, because we let no one hone us. And so we are very pivotal in, of course, being the dominant society in Western Canada. And First Nations were a very small population at the time, but we had a very solid relationship working with each other and respecting each other. But as history has shown, the nation really originated in here, and this where the new people, they called them at one time, was established. Now, you know, after 200 years of struggle and trying to find our rightful place, we bought Manitoba Metis Federation in 1870, and we bought truly Western Canada followed right behind us because we were the protector. Even annexation in the United States, it was us, the Métis, said you come across there, then you battle with the Metis Nation. So really, we've been very important in the history of the development of Canada. But however, you know, the struggle of who we are has been long existence, and nobody really claimed that they were us in the East. No one. And until after, of course, the constitutional revision in 1982, and then as we move forward, where the Métis are included, then the establishment of the MNC in 1983, that we'd have a Métis voice of our homeland and our distinct place in society and federation. So as we evolve as a people, and we finally started winning rights, we started winning issues. We won the land claims in 2013. MMF land claims. So you look at all of that, all of a sudden now there's new negotiations with Canada. We won the Daniels case. It was very significant ruling on the Daniels case, which makes it very clear that Canada has an obligation to treat the Métis people, Métis Nation, as equally as you would treat First Nations. And so from that perspective, Canada now has to renegotiate its relationship, basically saying Canada has failed us for 100 years. And so now we need to renegotiate health, you know, education, all of these programs, housing that should have been entitled to us as Indigenous people in Canada. But people are seeing that and saying, wow, I want in. I want a piece of that now. And so there are people today, whether it's hunting rights that we've been able to achieve, that's saying, well, I have the right to hunt as the Métis have the right to hunt in the West. So from that perspective, we get to see that people now want to say, I want a piece of that. So if I mix blood, I could declare myself a Métis. That is not a Métis person. Just because you have mixed blood, we don't go by blood quantum in our nation. So when you start looking at where we go by our culture, our distinctness of us, who we are in the prairies, and we have our own culture, our own music, our own history, all of it intercombined, and a connectivity that stays on for hundreds of years here. So you can't just pop up tomorrow and say you're Métis. And that's what's been happening in Eastern Canada. It's starting to happen in Ontario. So there's a clear issue that we are facing, what we call the third invasion. First time 1870, second time 1885. Now we have a new one that's coming in, and potentially more dangerous than the 1870, 1885 battles.
MNO, Metis Nation of Ontario's suspended. They were on probation. You said that they're the gateway to the new Eastern invasion. What does all this mean, the suspension and all this, for those who, the Metis Nation citizens there that have been there for a long time and don't know where they stand today?
Well, you know what should happen in Ontario is I think they need to start to clarify themselves. Because the President, Margaret Fro, for example, defines 3 different Métis people. She talks about the Métis Nation, which is really, there is a strip of Ontario, the most western part of Ontario. Kenora is stretched this way. There's not a question. Those are particular within our homeland. But outside of Kenora that way, that's not our people. Even Pauli's not our people. He claimed to be Métis. In fact, he said he was not Métis, but the ideology of his indigenous background was classified as Métis. But when you look at it from that perspective, those individuals like Mattawa, for example, the Tremblay case out of Quebec, which is connected to Mattawa people, they lost. And so, but Ontario still accepts Mattawa as part of the Métis Nation citizens. And they Barrie, Sarnia, we have no historical connection to those people and nowhere evidence that does it prove that. So what Margaret does, the President, she defines the Métis Nation, Métis rights holders of Ontario, and Métis, which is the other. So there's 3 different distinctive bases. Even in their own question and answer they have on their website, they admit that a certain percentage of their people do not belong to the Métis Nation. They're not part of our historical connection. So there's a clear definition we've had established in 2002 by all 5, including Ontario, 5 provinces. They've broken that commitment. They walked away from the 2002 definition that we have held steadfast on. And it took us a long time to get there. We finally are there, defining clearly our homeland, our people, our history. So we can go into any court challenge today, and we know we can defend our people there. The problem we face now is that we're being successful. Success sometimes has challenges. Now that we're being successful, people want a piece of that. They want a part of that money. They want a part of those rights. If they want to go to court and fight for themselves, go ahead. Do like we did. We waited 200 years to get where we are. So go and fight your Métis rights and Métis, if you want to classify yourself Métis, but you're not part of our nation.
You don't want to call it infighting, I guess, but there are, troubles within the Metis National Council. Is what was happening in Ontario the reason that we're seeing this, and why we have the new tri-council meetings going on with MNA and MNS? And
well,
MNO?
you look clearly. Ontario is the pivotal debate that's happening right now, where President Patra and President McCallum of Saskatchewan are supporting Ontario and supporting those new people that are coming in. And I'm seeing and I believe clearly, without question, by the hundreds of thousands in the future, potentially millions in decades to come. So when you start looking at that process, and you start looking at the way things are evolving, I believe that very clearly. I'll give you, Margaret Fro, I think, has a legal background, so she's good with her wording. But people got to listen very carefully what she says. And see, for example, she said, we did an independent review, an independent study that these people are Métis. But to whose terms? Not ours. She's creating her own terms, her own ideologies of what a nation, a Métis community exists. And she said the province and I came to a conclusion that Mattawa is part of it, Barrie is part of it, Sarnia is part of it. I don't care what Ford does or the Ontario government does. I don't think it was Ford, but previous government that agreed that these were considered to them ID Métis community. But they didn't say Métis Nation, they said Métis communities. So, but my view is that that process has a lingering effect, and so it's caught itself now into national process. I am shocked at Saskatchewan. I know it's not trust me, it's just the president and a few on the cabinet. I have spoken directly to people in that cabinet, and they're 100% opposed to what the president's doing. I've seen Alberta, Region 1 is opposed to it now. They wrote a letter very openly. Mm-hmm. If Alberta wants to go the pathway of hoping the floodgate for Eastern Canada and letting all those people come in which aren't our people and declaring them part of our Métis Nation citizenship and taking away our rights, taking away our resources, then Region 1 saying, I'm going on my own. We will, as a people, want to be part of the historic Métis Nation. We're not going to be part of Ontario. If Audrey wants to be part of Ontario, you go right ahead, is what Region 1 is saying. And I think you're going to see a lot of that coming out of Saskatchewan. Our assembly in Manitoba made it very clear, and I have 3,000, the largest assembly in this country every year. I did my consultations, I did my, they haven't done that. There's not one assembly that's ratified their decision to support Ontario to bring all those people, new people in. I did my own work back home, which I always done. And I did my consultations, I went through my assembly, and I asked the people, if Ontario is allowed to bring all of these new people into our Metis National Council, what do we do? Our people said, then we withdraw. And unanimous decision, 3,000 people all said we withdraw from MNC.
And we're going to talk a bit more about that potential withdrawal after a quick break here. We'll continue our conversation with Manitoba Metis Federation President David Chartrand. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is David Chartrand, the president of the Manitoba Metis Federation. And President Chartrand, you've said that whatever it is that's going on right now with the different Metis organizations here, that it's going to lead to troubles when it comes to dealing with the federal government, lead to difficulties. Why is that? Well,
firstly, I remember the days when Paul Martin and I sat down many years ago when he was Prime Minister. And one of the inquisitive nature of Minister of Finance at the time and became Prime Minister was asking us, who's the Metis Nation? Who are you? How many of you do exist in this province? So we know there's an estimation close to 400,000 of our people. Now, when we start talking about responsibility, federal fiduciary responsibility that takes place in this country, it's going to mean that Canada has a responsibility to pay back and give back to the Metis people what they have not done for over 100 years. And I said, for example, on a show to you, I said health, education, and housing, all these programs that will come. So if Canada all of a sudden says, well, okay, how many of you now? All of a sudden, this floodgate could be wide open to be not 400,000, to be in the future millions. Mm-hmm. So who's going to pay for all of this? Who's going to be responsible for all this? And how do you do a proper planning to deal with the people, the rightful people that are inheritances? And you look at the Halibu in eastern Canada, when they created that reserve in Newfoundland Island, and you had over 100,000 apply that they were partly connected as, right? Mm-hmm. Government just went crazy and said, holy man, what's going on here? That same thing's going to happen to us if the East is allowed in. And so I think they're trying to finalize that, and they brought it down substantially. But if you start looking at it from that concept, we need to be very clear to identify ourselves. But not only that, to protect our young people, our future. And we're not going to let Ontario destroy that. We're not going to let Alberta and Saskatchewan somehow figure out a way. I assure you we have a map, Dennis, that defines our homeland. As I said, there's a strip in Ontario. Mm-hmm. I assure you, but not long from now, you watch this new tri-council, they call themselves. They're going to create a new body, a new entity. They'll expand a map probably nearly all the way to Quebec. That's probably what they're going to do next. Then they'll change the definition. And then you have now chaos in this country, because now you don't know who belongs to whom.
When we talk about negotiations, of course, those have gone very well under the Trudeau Liberals, billions of dollars to the Métis during that time. Is this money what's really, behind all of this?
Well, I think for people coming in, it's about the money, it's about the resource, the fiduciary responsibility Canada will have for them. All of these factors probably play into people. Why are they coming now? Where were they before? Where were they when we were struggling and fighting with nothing? So you question yourself, why are they coming now by the thousands? So you start asking yourself. There's definitely, I would say again, some kind of individual choice for benefit that they have in their minds. But you look at from our perspective, I think we negotiated $2.5 billion. I led the negotiations. I was the lead negotiator for all of it. And not once with Patra involved, not once with Margaret come and help out, or even Glenn. From Saskatchewan. I led the charge and negotiated very hard and vigorously, and we got the biggest deal in our entire history as a nation. And yet they have the audacity to say the MNC is dysfunctional, it has financial issues, they've got all these problems, but they're there with their hands out to get the check when we finish negotiations. And they even have the audacity to say, well, we're going to wait till we get our check in 2020, and then we'll pull out of the MNC maybe. So it's unfortunate, but I think Money for me is that it's a return of our taxes. We pay billions of dollars of taxes to the Métis people, and we're finally getting some of our return revenue investment in this country, and it's going directly to the needs of our people, housing. I'm building senior homes in Manitoba, and we're moving forward on all daycare centers, and the risk goes on and on and on. So amazing. We just announced $4 million in bursaries to our kids in Manitoba, $5,000 a student in post-secondary education. So you're going to see a lot more of that, but when people start reading that, in Eastern Canada, they say, well, how come I don't have that? I want that too. So that's where the problem's starting to lie. People are starting to roll in saying, look, there's too many good things happening to Métis people out there. I want a piece of that. And where are we going to take it from? The true Métis citizens of the prairies. They're going to come after the money of the prairies and try and take it away from us. As I said, we waited 200 years to get our recognition, our place in Confederation, finally, in a respectful place in Confederation. Now somebody's going to try to steal it from us. It ain't happening.
You mentioned the transparency and accountability, and that's what the Tri-Council raised concerns about, saying that there wasn't any transparency or accountability. There's been, reporting on audits at MNC. I believe there's lawsuits involved in all of that as well now. But, should this not be a concern for people?
Well, of course there's a concern. In fact, they should be concerned there's an issue. That's why we report at the annual assembly every year. We have a clean audit. Our audits are always independent. All the audits are independent, and we had a surplus in our operations. The only challenge we faced was when a disgruntled employee, and a couple of them, but one in particular, left the MNC but attempted to destroy the reputation of MNC internally. So an audit was conducted by Ernst & Young, a very in-depth audit. But in fact, the audit was only supposed to be about the complaints made by this disgruntled employee. I actually went one step further. I said, I want you to audit everything. Go through back. Go as far as you want. Dig as wherever you want. The MNC will have never have anything to hide. So let me tell you this, Dennis, which you'll be the first to know. The audit is going to be complete. Ernst & Young's coming down. I sent a letter to all the presidents on that, saying let's meet right after the audit's completed. Then we'll have a proper perspective of this discussion. But let's understand this. The disgruntled employee spoke to the president of Alberta, Madam Patra, spoke to Margaret Froh, but they wouldn't share to me what the complaint was all about. So I had no way to defend MMC, even though two governing members were aware of what this disgruntled employee was trying to do to us. But what I'm proud about is that the audit is going to be clean, it's clear, as it always was, and there is no dysfunctional operation or financial problems at the MNC. And I can't wait that audit. It should potentially come out this week, and if not, it's within days.
We'll look forward to seeing the copy. Well, we've got more to talk about, including some big meetings that are coming up for MNC. We've just got to step aside for another quick break, and we'll continue our conversation with Manitoba Metis Federation President David Chartrand here on Face to Face. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is the president of the Manitoba Metis Federation, David Chartrand, and the Metis National Council will be holding a gathering on identity, citizenship, and homeland in Saskatoon early in March. What are your hopes coming out of this gathering?
Well, two things first. I've seen in the paper where President Patra and McCallum and Froh have indicated they want a Board of Governors meeting. I've written to them stating we will have a Board of Governors meeting, but we need to deal with this audit. So let's get this audit done, then we'll sit down and go over it together. But since then, suspension, President Patra, and supported President Froh openly, that they were opposed to the resolution made at the annual assembly. The assembly was very clear to us. It said this is what Ontario must do. We know that they've grandfathered people in. We've known that they've accepted people that are not part of our nation, and they need to follow the 2002 definition that was very clear, the registry system that we put in place. So I have an obligation now to the Assembly. The Assembly told me what to do, and as spokesman now of the Metis National Council, I got to abide it. So is the National President, Clément Chartier. And so does the Board of Governors, all of them. There's a resolution of the Assembly telling us what we have to do and what Ontario needs to do. Ontario basically blocked the wall and said, no, you're not coming in, you're not looking at a registry, you're not coming in. We are doing our independent study. And their independent study is done by their own definition of what is an historic committee, not what we define an historic committee, what they define. So of course their findings will say it meets our criteria. What's their criteria? It's not the Metis Nation criteria. So that issue was very clear. They said, we want a meeting. We want to deal with this issue. So we called a meeting March 9th and 10th, said, okay, let's have a full blown out meeting here. Let's everybody have a chance to speak. President Petra, you can speak, McCallum, all your delegates can come and speak there. And citizens at large, if you want to come and speak. We have communities out there are lost. They don't know what's going on. Right. They hear stuff in the media. So guess what they do? They're the ones that demand a meeting. We give them one. They're calling the same date, same meeting in Ontario now for March 9th, and they're taking their delegation to Ontario. So it just shows you that it's hypocrisy and a fallacy of statements that are making in the media, that they don't really want a meeting with the people. They want to have their own way of doing things, just as three presidents. We've never been governed by a dictatorial style of politics. That's the way of democracy has been in our nation for 200 years. Even in hunting, the captain of the hunt had to be elected every day. So from these individuals who believe that they, as presidents, are not responsible or accountable to others, I think they need to go back and reflect their own democracy. I think there's a chance there for them to come speak out, come and defend Ontario, come defend their positions, and let's see if we can come to a compromise or a solution. But if they're not going to come to the meeting, which they've never come to any meeting, they demand on media, on your show or other places, there's no meetings, there's no board meetings. Well, clearly there's one because they won't attend. If we invite them, they won't come. Audrey Putter has never attended one of our committees for 3 years now. So our training dollar, ISET it's called. And she just walked away and never came back. And that's just a national body. So you start looking at these things, it's what's being said in the media by them and what's happening in the back room, two different things. So come to the meeting on March 9 and 10. Come and say your piece and come and share your positions, why you defend Ontario, why you think Ontario should allow all those people in.
What does this all mean for April when there's supposed to be the annual General Assembly, there's supposed to be the election of a new president for the first time in a long time? What does it mean for that meeting?
Well, it leaves a question if there are still rules that have to abide with. The Board of Governors still have mandates, they have authorities, and at the end of the day we have responsibility back to our nation. I believe the Assembly will go ahead in April. Will they still be part of it? The Tri-Council, first of all, those aren't even self-government documents, but that's another story. We could talk about that. They claim to have self-government documents. They have an MOU, that's all they have. But let's talk about this whole issue. They will not, in my view, whether they decide to attend, but they will probably not attend if Ontario is not allowed to come to the Assembly and have their 5 votes at the Assembly. So if they don't let us deal with Ontario before the Assembly, then how do we address it when it comes to the Assembly? We're going to have some kind of crazy show happening in our Assembly. We're not going to have people screaming and yelling. We're leaders. We have to act like leaders. So, but I think what's going to happen there is that my plan is as spokesman, is still to hold the election in April and have a president elected. But Tri-Council said they might pull out of the MNC after they get their check. They're waiting for the check of 2020. Then they might pull out because they got money now. So, but they're going to lead me to do all the negotiations. But unfortunately, people in Saskatchewan are not aware of this, Dennis, that the 4 provinces agreed that I continue to negotiate for 2020 budget. Saskatchewan just pulled out the other day, so you're probably not aware of this. They just pulled out. They don't want us to negotiate on their behalf, so they'll be negotiating on their own. So we'll still push the 2020 budget, and we'll move forward to that. In anticipation, the election will happen in April. And if there's some kind of prevention by the presidents, they'll have to answer their own citizens about that. I
have no time left, so a yes or no answer, I guess. Are you planning to run for president of MNC?
I would never leave my province. I love my province, and MMF is bigger than MNC. So, in fact, MMF is the Metis Nation. So no, I'm just joking on that part. I don't want people to say, "Oh, wow, how about us?" No, I think everybody comes from Red River, and the MMF will always play a pivotal role protecting our nation. And that's where I belong. That's what elected me, and I will stand committed to my people.
Well, we look forward to both of those upcoming meetings. Our thanks to the Manitoba Metis Federation President David Chartrand for joining us for these episodes. If you have any suggestions for future guests, please email us at news@aptn.ca. This show and all past episodes are also available as podcasts. You can find those at aptnnews.ca/face-to-face podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Dennis Ward. We'll see you next time.